We had suggested this briefing also in response to your requests to talk about the budget. But since I just mentioned the Capital Master Plan, let me just mention also some pertinent facts, because the relocation of the staff to swing spaces has really progressed apace. And as of the 31 December, we have actually moved 4,540 staff to other spaces, swing spaces. And most of the press corps, I know, has already relocated to this building, and you have moved in. The Office of the Secretary General relocated from the 30th floor to the 3rd floor of the temporary North Lawn building during the New Year's weekend, and the Secretary General already on Monday had a senior meeting, and it was all installed, so I think that went very smoothly. And by the end of January, the 25th, in fact, we're expecting that all conference rooms will, in fact, be migrated from the conference building to the temporary North Lawn building. And there are some pockets of staff remaining, and they are being moved out apace. And I think the final closing of the building, so to say, with staff will be towards April of this year. Now let's come to the budget. As you know, the main session of the General Assembly ended in the early morning of 24 December. And we think that in general it was a very good session, it was a very productive session, and we know that the scale of 2010-11 regular budget and the scale of assessments were of course the main items, and the scale of assessment comes every 3 years as an item and also took a considerable amount of attention from the member states, obviously, very important. The budget approval in the legislative bodies is really a true example of what we would call the United Nations in action. Everyone got involved. I mean, not only the Secretariat staff and the member states, but it was the President of the General Assembly, the Chairman of the Fifth Committee, the Bureau members, the Rapporteur, the coordinators for each specific item. There's always a coordinator, and the Fifth Committee delegates, and also us. You know, we were engaged in very intense discussions. I should say that during the session, the Fifth Committee considered 18 agenda items, including the program budget. And they had before them, just to dazzle you with some statistics, 132 reports, in addition to 24 reports which had come from ACABQ. There were 22 formal meetings and 94 informal consultations, which gives member states a possibility to also question secretariat officials on a variety of topics. And these were held, you know, during the day, they were held in the evenings and also weekdays. And there's been a question at times, as you know, member states stayed up until late evenings and nights, particularly in the last part of the session. But I think that this really demonstrates how very strategically important the budget is and how important member states rate this. And it really reflects also member states and management's interest in a very financially healthy organization, which is obviously all of our goal. Let me share now some of the highlights of the budget. The initial appropriations for 2010-11 amounted to $5.2 billion. And the member states did reduce some of the proposals of the Secretary General, but the General Assembly also approved a few initiatives that were not proposed by the Secretary General. So in the end, it kind of netted out. There's only a marginal difference between what was put forward by the SG in dollar terms and also the ultimate level that was approved by the General Assembly. It is approximately a $16 million net increase to the budget level, which was initially proposed by the Secretary General. We had a staffing level for the budget year of 10,281, and that was compared to 10,085 in 2008-09. And there were increasing priorities and mandates, which have resulted in corresponding increase in the number of posts. And what I can also share with you is that, as per the Secretary General's proposal, the Assembly decided to upgrade the head of the New York Liaison Office for the High Commissioner for Human Rights to the Assistant Secretary General. And also there was one additional upgrade, and that was the deputy post in Department of Safety and Security was upgraded to Assistant Secretary General. Let me just say there are a number of posts that were in terms of the posts approved on UNRWA. We had 3 posts requested or proposed by the Secretary General, and the Assembly actually went beyond that and added an additional 11 posts. And on UNON, again, the member states decided to establish an Undersecretary General, a Director General for the United Nations Office at Nairobi, at the level of the USG, as I mentioned, and a number of other posts were added or reclassified in various budget sections, but you know, not very many. In terms of non-posts, there were a number of across-the-board cuts. One of them was external printing. It was cut by $1 million. The other one was consultants and experts. They were cut by 7%. And there were other non-post resources were cut by 2%. So it was kind of an across-the-board cut. And the only exception that was made was the development account and also the Office for OCSS, Central Support Services. So I'm stopping on that. And this was because there had been a very significant reduction that was in the previous biennium. And as you know, this is for the maintenance of the building and infrastructure, from the light bulbs to everything else. And so it was decided to exclude that. There were other reductions, and that was for business continuity management. This is very important to us also because of the H1N1 influenza scheme, and also they approved this, so there was a significant cut. And but on the other hand, the General Assembly said we would like you to come back to us in the context of the 2012-2013 program budget. They also did not approve enterprise content management, customer relationship management, but again asked the Secretariat to come back with proposals for the next program budget. The Unified Disaster Recovery Program plan was also cut down to 1.5 million, and that was also including the Brindisi Enterprise Data Center. Let me just turn to the Special Political Commissions, and you know that Special Political Commissions are a significant chunk of the regular budget and has been growing very steadily. And in fact, if you look at the regular budget, it kind of looks pretty flat, but the Special Political Budget part, if you highlight it, comes out quite high. We had originally at the budget outline foreseen an amount of 829 million for SPMs for the 2 years, and that was based on the best known estimate at the time. But during the course of the preparations of the budget, the likely amount for SPMs was revised to approximately $1 billion. So that's a significant increase. I mean, it's about 20%, really 22%. And what the Assembly did is they approved the overall increase for SPMs to $1 billion in anticipation of the likely total biennial requirements. But they did, for 2010, what they did is they amounted to 599 million for 27 special political commissions, and ultimately they approved for this year 569 million. So that's a reduction of about $30 million. Another proposal they endorsed was the enterprise resource planning, and they endorsed the pilot first option, which means we will deploy it once it is developed in a controlled environment and not all over the organization, to test it, to make sure that it really works properly as it's supposed to. And they did approve that, and so we had at the requested level of about $24 million. Safety and security was also approved as proposed by the Secretary General. And when we come now to human resources, which is of course always a very important subject to us, yes, you know, in the years when we have a budget approval, we do not talk much about human resources. That's in the other year, so that'll come up again in the fall. But the General Assembly did request the Secretary General not to take measures on geographic mobility, as we had proposed, because they wanted us to wait and put it in a larger context at the next General Assembly session, because they wanted to have a report on an overall approach to comprehensive mobility policy, and they had requested that last year, in fact, in 63-50. We and the Secretary General, of course, under his direction, remain committed to geographic moves as a requirement to career development, and we will revert to it in the next fall session. The other office that was established, and that was the General Assembly acknowledged the General's Office of the offer of the Government of Angola for space, and they took a decision to have an information center established in Luanda. There were a couple of issues, and I'll conclude with that, that were deferred for further future consideration, and that was the continuing appointments. Again, this will be taken up in the context of the human resources issues in the fall. They also deferred the issue of procurement, and they also deferred the issue of limited budgetary authority to the first resumed 64th session. So they gave us a commitment authority for the first 4 months of this year until they have time to look at it again. And they also want to have a review of the mandate of OIOS, and that is again to be resumed at the 64th session, the first resumed one. So I think that you know that Secretary General remains committed to using the resources of the organization in the most effective and efficient way. He's very mindful also of the fact that economic difficulties and the economic climate is not exactly conducive to having a very lavish budget. So we're all very mindful of that. Let me conclude here and take your questions.